Good morning and welcome to the Grace Nuggets podcast. As promised, I moved the broadcast date, the publishing date to Monday due to my schedule. So you're going to start seeing these pop up on Mondays. Let's turn to Romans because that's where we're going to be. And we're in Romans chapter 9. And we are going through the three chapters, Romans 9, 10, 11, which are dealing with the question, what happens to the nation of Israel? Um, Israel as a nation rejected the Messiah in the light of all the Old Testament promises that were given to them, and as a result of that, they have been temporarily, I'm emphasizing that, temporarily laid aside, so that God could turn His attention and present the gospel solely to the Gentiles. And during this time, which is called the fullness of the Gentiles, which we will get to in Romans chapter 11, that there is this period in which the Gentiles are going to be the main focus of salvation, not the nation of Israel. Now, can individual Jews still get saved? Of course. But the nation of Israel has been laid aside. And then once the time of the Gentiles is done, right? And that includes the rapture, which the church will be raptured up. And then there is the judgment on the Gentile world, which happens during the tribulation, um, which begins after the rapture. And that happens for 7 years. And at the end of those 7 years, Christ will return, bodily return, physical return, and set up his kingdom. And once again, the nation of Israel will be the focal point. People will have to go up to Israel, to Jerusalem, to worship, that are living on the earth during the millennium. But 9, 10, 11 are asking, okay, what about Israel? And does God have the right to do that? Yes, he does, because he is righteous and he is sovereign. And this is all part of his eternal plan, but all this also dovetail with um, people's free will and their rejection of truth. Whether we're talking the nation of Israel, whether we're talking Esau, whether we're talking Pharaoh as an unbeliever, um, God is right in everything that he does. And so we need to keep this in mind. And there is a balance there, like all scripture. There is a balance between God's sovereignty and man's free will. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to let just scripture say what it is, because there's times in which one is emphasized over the other, but we got to remember to maintain that balance. All right. So last time we looked at the example of uh, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob, of course, they were the children of Isaac and Rebekah. And Esau was physically the firstborn, but it's Jacob that the line of Christ comes and that the blessings come. And God, before they were born, God chose Isaac, but he also includes in Romans 9:13 the verse that says, "As I have written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated." That is taken from Malachi chapter 1, which is the last book of the Old Testament. And he's looking back at because that statement validates the choice that he made. And so it's through Jacob that the line of the seed is the line of Christ. And Esau had that opportunity, but he rejected it basically for food, right? Um, and then when he saw what he did, he wanted to get it back, and by then it was too late. So again, sovereignty, free will, kind of going hand in hand. So let's turn to Romans chapter 9. We're going to look at verse 14. We're going to continue this. All through chapter 9, it really emphasizes this. Chapter 10 emphasizes Israel's current condition, and it's their salvation goes from national to individual. And then Romans chapter 11 talks about the future in which the nation of Israel will be brought back. This period at which we live, called the fullness of the Gentiles, will come to an end, and that all the promises given to the nation of Israel will find their fulfillment. So we just got to keep in mind how important these chapters are, because it really answers that question. Because there are many, many churches out there that are preaching that Israel has been replaced. It's called replacement theology, and that the church has taken their place. The problem with that is that God doesn't go back on his promises. Those promises were given to the nation of Israel. They were given unconditionally. They are eternal promises if you look at what scripture has to say about them, right? And so God doesn't go back on his word. And eventually those promises will find their fulfillment. And those are physical promises. So how can we as the church fulfill that? Well, we don't. We are spiritual people. We have spiritual blessings. We have all our blessings in the heavenlies. So you got to take the full scope of Scripture, right? And so Israel did reject Christ as a nation, but the nation will be brought back in, and those promises given to them in the Old Testament will find their fulfillment in the future. Well, let's look at Romans chapter 9. Let's start with verse 14. He said, "What shall we say then?" We're just going to read and then we'll go back. "What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? Certainly not. Was God wrong in dealing with Jacob and Esau like that? Of course not." Then he's going to give us another example. "For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whomever I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whomever I will have compassion. So then it is not of him who wills, nor of him who runs, but of God who shows mercy." It's not merit-based. And of course, God shows compassion and mercy. He sent his son to die on the cross for the whole world, but those that he accepts for salvation are those who respond by faith, not of works, right? "For the scripture says to the Pharaoh," and this is taken from Exodus, "For this very purpose I have raised you up, that I may show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth. Therefore he has mercy on whom he wills, and on whom he wills he hardens." And we're going to look at this, right? So again, we're going to see a combination of God hardening Pharaoh and Pharaoh hardening himself. "You will say to me then, why does he still find fault, for who has resisted his will? But indeed, O man, who are you to reply against God? Will the thing formed say to him who formed it, why have you made me like this?" I mean, the bottom line is, God doesn't answer to anybody. "Does not the potter have the power over the clay from the same lump to make one vessel for honor and another for dishonor? What if God, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, and that he might have known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy which he had prepared beforehand for glory, even us whom he called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles." And this, he's bringing in the idea of the Gentiles are being offered salvation. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Romans 9, 14 and 15. Here's reading from the New Living Translation. "Are we saying then that God was unfair? Of course not. For God said to Moses, I will show mercy to anyone I choose, and I will have compassion to anyone I choose. So it is God who decides to show mercy, whether we can neither choose it nor work for it. The Lord is completely free to choose whomever he pleases based on whatever criteria he has established." The verse quoted in Romans 9:15 is taken from Exodus 33:19, in which the Lord chose to reveal his glory to Moses when he passed him on the rock. At Christ's birth, he chose to announce the birth of his son to the lowly shepherds rather than the Pharisees who went on to tell others. So it is today. The Lord chooses to reveal his glory through his word to those whom he chooses. The question is for us, are we responding to his glory? So there is a responsibility on our free will part. Romans 9:17, again reading from the New Living Translation. "For the scriptures say that God told Pharaoh, I have appointed you for the very purpose of displaying my power in you and to spread my fame throughout the earth." So you see, God chooses to show mercy to some, and he chooses to harden the heart of others, so they refuse to listen. All right? Paul now presents Pharaoh and the hardening of his heart. The story of Moses and Pharaoh runs from Exodus 1 through 15. Israel had been in bondage to Israel for about 430 years, as predicted by the Lord. And it was time for the Lord to deliver them through his servant Moses, so that they may begin their journey to the land that he has prepared for them. As we look at this portion, we see a combination of the Lord hardening Pharaoh's heart and the Pharaoh choosing to harden his heart. God's sovereignty and man's free will as it relates to the releasing of the nation of Israel. So I'm going to be going through some portions in Exodus, which I would encourage you to go back and look at on your own. Exodus 4:21. "And the Lord told Moses, when you arrive back in Egypt, go to Pharaoh and perform all the miracles I have empowered you to do. But I will harden his heart so he will refuse to let the people go." In order to understand this, it is important to understand what was being presented to Pharaoh. God, through the miracles, was demonstrating his omnipotence to Israel, his all-powerfulness, God's own people, and to Pharaoh and to the people of Egypt. See, so it's through the miracles that the Lord used those to harden Pharaoh's heart. Well, there's a backstory to that. The backstory is, from the Egyptians' perspective, Pharaoh was considered a god who was walking among them. So when God displayed his superiority to Pharaoh, he could either believe the Lord and Moses, which means go against everything that he's been raised and taught about who he is in the Egyptian religion, or harden his heart to the truth of the Lord. And the Lord, Jehovah, which is the self-existent or eternal one. So he used the miracles to harden Pharaoh's heart. But that's the backstory. Pharaoh was considered a god. This is taken from a quote from an article from the Carlos Museum in Egypt. The ruler of ancient Egypt was called Pharaoh. Pharaohs were looked upon as more than rulers. They were gods, small g, chosen to lead the people and maintain order, and provided an important link between the Egyptian people and their gods. So this was a battle between a god, small g, a Pharaoh, and the God, big G, of Jehovah, as to who was really in charge. That's what's going on in the background. Exodus chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. As to this presentation, Israel's leaders, Moses and Aaron, went and spoke to Pharaoh, and they said, "This is what the Lord, the self-existent one, the God of Israel, says, let my people go so that they may hold a festival in my honor in the wilderness." "Is that so?" retorted Pharaoh. "And who is the Lord? Why should I listen to him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." He was God. They can't, these Jewish people who were slaves to them can't come in and tell Pharaoh now what to do. Exodus chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. Then the Lord said to Moses, pay close attention to this. And these, I'm all reading from the New Living Translation, by the way. "I will make you seem to God like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. Tell Aaron everything I command you, and Aaron must command the Pharaoh to let the people of Israel leave his country. But I will make Pharaoh's heart stubborn so I can multiply my miraculous signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. Even then Pharaoh will refuse to listen to you. So I will bring down my fist on Egypt, then I will rescue my forces, my people, the Israelites, from the land of Egypt with great acts of judgment. When I raise my powerful hand and bring out the Israelites, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." And then we get to Acts chapter 8, verses 13 through 19, which say, "So the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the courtyards, out of the fields." So there were different plagues. And if you look at it, each one of the plagues was associated with one of their gods. So God was using basically their religion against them. He was using the physical manifestations of those plagues to tear down their gods, right? And so not only was he attacking Pharaoh as God, he was attacking also their whole religious system. And I'm not going to be able to find it in my Bible. I had a thing showing how the plagues attached to different gods. There were 10 of them. Oh, here it is right here. The god and goddesses of Egypt. And so he went against all the different gods because they believed in a plurality of gods. And he used all of those plagues to tear down their gods. Back to Exodus chapter 8, verse 15. "But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart and did not heed them, as the Lord had said." So as long as the Lord put pressure on, Pharaoh gave in, but then we left his foot off the gas, so to speak. Pharaoh would say, "No, forget it." So the Lord said to Moses, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your rod and strike the dust of the land so that it becomes lice." So then he did that. There were the 10 plagues. And in verse 19, then the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart grew hard. He wasn't going to give in. And he did not heed them, just as the Lord had said. Same thing with the Pharisees, right? When the Lord came and exposed their self-righteousness, they dug their heels in. But they had a choice to make. Pharaoh had a choice. And the Lord used the hardness of heart, his hardness of heart, against him. If you divorce these verses from the Old Testament context, you will come to an unbalanced view of God's sovereignty. Is God sovereign? Absolutely, and praise his marvelous name that he is. Everything that he has declared in his word will come to pass, and no one can change that. His sovereignty also extends to our lives as children, and should be of enormous comfort to us. Sovereignty is not a dirty word; it is a great word. But you got it. But it is a character and a nature of God. But within that sovereignty, man does have free will. But that does not relieve us of the responsibility to respond by faith to his grace for our lives. People go to the lake of fire not because they're not one of the elect. They go to the lake of fire because they have chosen to reject the gospel of Jesus Christ, nor of the unbeliever to respond to the gospel, which Paul will point out in chapter 10 regarding Israel and their current blindness as a nation. Verse 19. Again, New Living Translation. Well, you might say, why does God blame people for not responding? Haven't they simply done what he makes them do? No, don't say that. Who are you, a mere human being, to argue with God? Should the thing that was created say to the one who created it, why have you made me like this? When a potter makes jars out of clay, doesn't he have the right to use the same lump of clay to make one jar for decoration and another to throw away? Remember, God is righteous in everything he is and does. This is all part of his eternal plan. And he gave Pharaoh plenty of opportunities to respond. But the Lord is right in what he is. Psalm 145, verse 17. The Lord is righteous in all his ways, gracious in all his works. Psalm 18:30. As for God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is proven. He is a shield to all who trust in him. The illustration of the potter and the clay is used in Isaiah and Jeremiah regarding the Lord in Israel. It also points out that the potter can do whatever he wishes to the clay, and that is God's sovereignty in dealing with Israel. Okay, let's do one more quote, and then we're going to stop here. We'll stop here at verse 22. The Lord can work sovereignly over individuals on the earth because he created it. When someone who is created voices disapproval of the Creator's work, he risks receiving a pronouncement of impending doom from the Lord. A potsherd, a broken, discarded piece of pottery, has no right to question the potter. Nor does a child have the right to question why his parents brought him into the world. In the same way, Israel had no right to question God, her maker, the world's creator, and his plans to raise up Cyrus. And Cyrus was a king that an unbeliever, some say he might have been saved, but that he allowed Israel to go back and to rebuild their city after the exile from the Babylonians. So in these two, as we look at Isaiah and Jeremiah, in these two passages, God presents two critical points in regards to his sovereignty. His ability to offer salvation by grace without merit, and his absolute right to bring judgment against those who disobey him. Both of these points will be presented in the following verses, which we're going to pick up next time when we get to, and we'll pick up in Romans chapter 9, verse 22. But I hope this helps to be able to kind of understand the background of why Pharaoh responded the way he did and why Egypt responded the way they did. The Lord was going after their whole religious system and exposing it. And he was showing that Pharaoh was not a God, that the God of the universe, the sovereign God, is infinitely greater than him and holds power over him. And with the plagues, he was going after their whole system of gods, again, small g. So he was exposing their self-righteousness, their self-religious system, just as he did with the Pharisees when Christ came. Self-righteousness causes hardness of heart. If you think you're right, you're not going to go well with the idea that God is right. Okay? So I think we're going to stop here, and we will pick it up next time with Romans 9:22. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next Monday.